This is a SandyBoy Productions podcast.
Welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast, where we help women remove the overwhelm of living their most holistic life. This is the place to find evidence-based nutrition tactics, healthy lifestyle and wellness tips, abundance mindset, and easily implementable low-tox living strategies so you can rise up to your full potential and protect your family's health. I'm your host, Stacey, certified holistic nutritionist and better living advocate. Now, let's get empowered with some simple swaps that make a big impact for optimal wellness.
Welcome back to episode 66 of the Urban Pharmacy Podcast. I hope that you're having the best day ever and that this finds you in health. Today's guest is Glen Merzer, a playwright, screenwriter, and author. He has authored or co-authored 11 books with a vegan message. His latest book, Food is Climate, argues that the only way to reverse climate change is to put an end to animal agriculture. Glen is also the author of Own Your Health, an examination of role of nutrition in health, told with humor and with personal anecdotes. Glen began his career in book writing as co-author with Howard Lyman of Mad Cowboy. Glen is also co-author of The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss and Unprocessed by Chef AJ, as well as other books advocating plant-based eating. The 10th anniversary new edition of Unprocessed has just been released, and I'll tell you what, if you don't have this book yet, you need to get it because it has wonderful recipes to help with weight loss specifically, and honestly, just longevity, because this way of whole food, plant-based eating without added salt, oil, and sugar is truly optimal for human health. And that is what the 10th anniversary of Unprocessed has in it. So I highly suggest that you get that book. It's down in the show notes. Chef AJ is incredible at creating recipes. She's back a few episodes on the podcast, and you can hear her story as well. But one of Glen's novels is Off the Reservation, which is a political satire about vegan congressman from the Midwest who runs for president. Glen grew up in Belmore, New York, and attended New College of Florida in Sarasota. You can find him at glenmerzer.com. So today we dig into the impacts of what animal agriculture has on our planet, and we talk about veganism and what that means to Glen and how that has transformed his life and how he impacts other people's lives through this way of living. And I really think that you're going to find some inspiration and maybe a few laughs from this episode. So I hope you love it and give us a review, and we will see you on the flip side. All right, have a great day. Glen Merzer, welcome to the Urban Pharmacy Podcast.
Thank you, Stacey. Good to see you.
Very thrilled to have you on. Climate is a very important topic that we need to talk about, especially on this podcast. We haven't talked too much about it. We've talked a lot about plant-based, but we haven't really made that connection of food and climate. And I think that you're probably the best person to talk to about this because you've written an entire book about it. Can you tell me a little bit more about how this entire lifestyle started for you, what you've done, and then we'll get into the importance of food with climate?
All right. Well, there's a lot of heart disease in my family. So I didn't know my grandparents. They were dead before I was born. And when I was a teenager, two of my uncles died of heart attacks. My mother had heart disease. So most of the men on both sides of my family seemed to die in their 50s of heart disease. So I didn't want to be middle-aged at 25. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to eat the way these people around me were eating. Mm-hmm. So I resolved at 17 to become a vegetarian. Now, I didn't know at that point to become a vegan. I don't even know if people were using the word back then. But I got a little scared when people told me as a vegetarian I wouldn't get enough protein. And they said, where will you get your protein? And I said, from cheese.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have any animal products except for cheese. But for, I think it was 19 years, I was a vegetarian plus cheese. I ate cheese. And I didn't have any health problems, of course, when I started as a teenager at 17. But by the time I was in my mid-30s, I started to develop some pains around my heart. And I thought, this is crazy. I'm a vegetarian and my genes must be so bad that I'm even getting heart disease in my 30s. But I didn't go to the doctor. I just thought about it. And I said, well, I'm not eating meat because of the saturated fat and cholesterol. And what is cheese but saturated fat and cholesterol? So I gave up cheese, became a vegan in my mid-30s, haven't had any problem, any pain in my heart ever since. And I've been fine. I go to the doctor once a year religiously for my checkup to ask my doctor how he's feeling. If he's good, that's it. I go home. That's it. I haven't had any problems.
To ask your doctor how he's feeling.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, so I really relate with you in regards to cheese and dairy because that's something that that was the last thing that I gave up because I do think, Glenn, that it wasn't just because I was highly addicted to it, but I do really think a lot of it was because I was fearful of the protein, just like you said. And, people are like, well, where are you going to get your protein? And you're like, oh, I don't know, and even just over a decade ago, like 12 years ago, when I did break free from dairy, which was again, the last like animal product that came out of my diet. I was still hanging on to it because I thought I needed that protein. And I was eating a lot of frozen yogurt on a daily basis, which was not just high in, lactose, but also high in sugar, and not ideal for me. So, wow. Okay. I'm really glad for you that your body said, hey, look, this is not working. And then you really realized, I got to get rid of the cheese. So I'm thankful that you're here because now you've written a book about how eating this way not only affects our longevity, but affects our planet. Yeah. So when did you start to think about writing a book about food and climate? Was this before or after you released the dairy from your life? Like, how did that all unfold?
Well, I got rid of the dairy when it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So at that time, I hadn't realized how much damage animal agriculture was doing to the planet. About 1996 or so, I met Howard Lyman, who was a fourth generation cattle rancher turned vegan and animal rights activist from Montana. And I got the opportunity to tell Howard's story. We wrote the book Mad Cowboy. We were engaged by Simon & Schuster. And that was my first time writing a nonfiction book. I'm a playwright, so I had had a couple of my plays published, but I'd never written a nonfiction book before. So Howard and I wrote Mad Cowboy. And as I learned Howard's stories, I learned how much damage he had done to the environment as a modern cattle rancher with a feedlot operation. So I began to learn then how the animal agriculture industry was destroying our streams and rivers, the runoff going into the ocean, creating ocean dead zones, how it was fouling the air, how it was creating noxious smells in regions. They have these manure pits on chicken farms and pig farms and cattle farms. It's just obnoxious. We create, I think it's five if I have the number right, it's 5,000 tons a second of manure in this country. So, it's just not sustainable. So I learned from Howard about that. But even at that point, mid-90s, I hadn't put together that animal agriculture was actually destroying our climate. And if you think about it, I've written a lot about health, but there's nothing more important to our health than being able to breathe. And so if the climate keeps heating up and there's more and more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, eventually we could destroy virtually all life on Earth and we won't be able to breathe. So we have to stop this. I didn't really learn so much about what animal agriculture was doing to the climate until maybe the last 5 years. And particularly in the last year when I came across a paper by Dr. Silas Rao that estimates that animal agriculture is responsible for at least 87% of greenhouse gases. Now think about that. If you think about it, it's sort of amazing. We have an existential crisis, a climate emergency. We know the Earth is heating. I mean, it's impossible if you know the facts to believe otherwise. You could see a chart that looks like a hockey stick where for 10,000 years we had a stable temperature. In the last 100 years, it goes up like this. So we know that humans are heating the planet. But the story we've been told is that it's because of fossil fuel burning. The story we've been told is that it goes like this because of our cars and trucks and airplanes and manufacturing. And here it is, an existential crisis, all of civilization at stake, much of life on the planet at stake, and we're being told a story that isn't really true. The truth is that it's going like this because of animal agriculture. Fossil fuels are part of the problem, but they may only be 15% of the problem, maybe 10% of the problem, maybe 5% of the problem. The major part of the problem is animal agriculture. We are destroying the Amazon rainforest, not so that we can drive cars around it, not so that we could fly airplanes around it, but for hamburger. So when you destroy the Amazon rainforest, that has an extraordinary effect on the climate. And we're not even considering what we've done to the climate in the past. I have on the front cover of my book, Food is Climate, I have a NASA map. And these red areas are what's called pasture maintenance fires. What are pasture maintenance fires? These are ranchers who have operations, whether it's with sheep or cattle or goats all over the planet. They do the same thing. Whatever the cattle or the sheep don't eat during the year, they burn. And nobody's measuring how much carbon dioxide is going into the atmosphere from these fires. Nobody is measuring how much it's degrading the soils. But if you look at the map of the world, you see a big patch of brown. This is the Sahara Desert, going to the deserts of the Middle East, the Thar Desert in northern India, to the Gobi Desert in China. Look at all that brown, a big stretch of brown. What happened? When the Earth was created, did somebody just mess up and forget to put forests there? No, it was forested, Stacey. I didn't know that before I started researching the book, but the Sahara was a forest and savanna land 10,000 years ago. Now we're talking about maybe 100 million years or more. It was forest and savanna. So what happened 10,000 years ago? Agriculture, chopping down trees. That's when humans invented agriculture. They started chopping down trees and grazing goats on the land. And we created the Sahara. So when you think of how much less food we have, how much harder it is for the world to sustain itself because we have a Sahara desert instead of a Sahara forest or Sahara grassland, then you think, are we going to have the Amazonian desert next? Are we going to have the California desert next? This was done by agriculture, and particularly animal agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Animal agriculture is the most pernicious force on the planet. It's destroying the earth. It has to be stopped.
And in particular, the large operations. I mean, of course, all ideally, but can you explain the difference, Glenn, for people that don't understand what's going on? Because this, like, we could take it from a macro level and go very micro, right? But on a macro level in farming, factory farms in particular, what are they doing? You were speaking about their waste products. You were speaking about like their, are the resources used. What is happening on these farms that is so detrimental to the earth, aside from us clearing this land that we need to keep our earth breathing?
Right. Well, factory farms are a nightmare. The grazing, the alternative to that is the grazing, the so-called grass-fed beef, and that's also a nightmare for the climate. And it's hard to say which is worse. In terms of animal welfare, I'm sure the cows that are grazing for a few years before they're slaughtered have a happier few years than the cattle in the feedlot. But in terms of the climate, the grazing cattle may be doing more harm than the feedlot cattle. And that's because when you graze, you're number one, you're degrading the land, degrading the soil. Number two, you're preventing that land, you're taking up more land. So you're preventing that land from having vegetation and forest on it. Whereas the feedlots are concentrated, so they don't take up as much land. And also the grazing cattle emit more methane than the feedlot cattle. And the methane is 120 times, at least 120 times as potent as carbon dioxide. So methane is really the gas that's heating up the climate more than anything else. Also, the grazing cattle live longer before they ship them off to slaughter because they don't gain weight as fast as the feedlot cattle. Mm. So the feedlot operations are a nightmare because of the manure and the lagoons of manure that they create. And the manure emits methane and nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is 300 times as potent as carbon dioxide. So when we talk about global warming on the news, and if we listen to Al Gore or the climate spokesman, they're always talking about cars and showing pictures of cars. That's carbon dioxide going out of the tailpipe. If you have enough trees, that carbon dioxide can be sequestered and turned into wood. Mm-hmm. So that carbon dioxide isn't nearly as much of a problem as the methane that's coming out of the cows. So why do we talk so much about the manufacturing smokestacks and the cars and the trucks? Because you can see it. You could see a smokestack and a plume of dark smoke going into the air, and it looks terrible. It looks like we're, fouling the air and creating global warming, and we are. But to a small extent, compared to the methane coming out of 1 billion cows. Yeah. So that's the number one problem. We have 1 billion cows on the earth. And cows are not a natural thing. I mean, 20,000 years ago, there weren't any cows. There were wild oxen. So we've created these animals because people, for some reason, like to eat them. I have no idea why. I never have. Let me ask you, Stacey, did you ever in your life look at a cow and get hungry? I mean, who would dream of eating this thing?
Definitely not. Yeah, definitely not. And it started for me, Glenn, like my dad was a fisherman, and I always had this pain in my heart and I never made the connection until I saw with cows. I did make the connection with fish early on, but not with cows until I had watched a documentary of the actual like slaughter and what happens. Then it was just, I was done. But yeah, no, I've never looked at a cow and thought, oh, I want to eat that. I've looked at a cow and been like, wow, that is
an amazing, beautiful, adorable creature, although very large. I would really like to rescue one and have one on our farm someday. It may happen. And since you live in Indiana, it would be lovely to have you come up and meet him or her once we do. But okay, so can we back up a little bit, because you're talking about methane. We can't see methane.
Right.
So that's such a good point to bring up. Like, okay, so there's that. But then we have these lagoons, and you mentioned them. Obviously, they smell horrible with factory farms, or, even if you have grazing cattle. But what are these lagoons doing to the earth? Why are they bad?
Well, it seeps through into the waterways. You ever hear on the news, oh, there's a crisis. There's romaine lettuce with E. coli. And everybody has to worry about the E. coli in their lettuce or their tomatoes or their cucumbers. And it makes me so angry at the media, because they just report it like there's such a thing as lettuce with E. coli. E. coli, you could look to the Latin root of the word. It comes from the colon of an animal. And so lettuce doesn't have a colon. So how did lettuce get E. coli? Every single time, 100% of the time, it's because it's downstream of a pig farm or a chicken farm or a cattle farm. So the problem is always animal agriculture. The problem isn't the lettuce. And so animal agriculture causes us so many problems that even when you think the problem is a vegetable, the problem is animal agriculture.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's creating dead zones in the oceans.
Yes. The nitrogen fertilizer is often used and overused to grow the grain, to feed to the cattle, and then the nitrogen pellets that they use run off into the streams and then run off into the oceans and create ocean dead zones. And we also get in our rivers fish kills from this. It's just everywhere you look, animal agriculture causes a problem. Mm-hmm. We're I hope coming out of, but we've been going through a terrible pandemic for the last 2 years. I think it's 6 million dead internationally, almost 1 million in the United States. There has never been a zucchini pandemic. Mm-hmm. Every pandemic is zoonotic, is caused by animals. And when we squeeze these animals together, in this case in China, it was apparently a live market where bats were near pangolins and different animals. And I don't know if they'll ever figure out exactly which animal it came from, but apparently originally from a bat, and then it may have transferred to another animal. There's one theory that it came from a laboratory. That's unlikely, but if it did, if I'm wrong, and it came from a laboratory, it's because they brought a bat into the laboratory. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's always from an animal. If we left the animals alone in the wild, this wouldn't be happening. So is 6 million dead not enough for people to stop this stupidity of eating animals? The animal agriculture causes pandemics. It's overheating the planet. It could destroy all life on the planet. It's ruining our rivers and waterways and oceans. We're going to have no life left in the ocean. Where fishing is a dying vocation all over the world because there are less and less fish left. We have forest fires caused by global warming. We have so many problems. Is hamburger really that much better than a plant burger? Then we have to suffer all these consequences. And plant burgers are great. Mm-hmm. You could make a delicious plant burger instead of a hamburger, and we could solve all these problems.
Yeah. And I mean, we could make, rice chickpea burgers and mushroom burgers, and they take no water. We're using so much water to feed the crops, or to water the crops, and then to water the animals.
Yeah.
And people just are not making that connection. So Glen, at what point was it then you're like, I can't take this anymore. I know too much. And now I need to write about it.
Well, it started with Mad Cowboy with Howard Lyman. That book came out in 1998. Then I met and became a friend of Chef AJ in Los Angeles. And she asked for my help with her book, Unprocessed. And that was about 10, 11 years ago. And now we've come out with the new 10th anniversary edition of the cookbook, Unprocessed. So it's AJ's book with my help in the writing. And she's got 30 new recipes in the book, and she's got some revised lower fat versions of the old recipes. The story is that when AJ came out with the first book, Unprocessed, she was herself overweight. She was 40 or 50 pounds overweight, and a lot of the recipes had nuts in them. And within a year after bringing that book out, she stopped eating nuts. Not that nuts are unhealthy, but they were not helping her attain her optimal weight. She became a weight loss expert a year after that book came out. And now, of course, she has her own podcast and a massive following. And now she's a weight loss expert. So now we've come out with a 10th anniversary edition of Unprocessed, and there's our lower fat recipes.
It's a beautiful cover, by the way.
Thank you.
Hey, Mama, I know how you feel. I felt the same way too. Overwhelmed, wanting to live a more holistic lifestyle, wanting to prioritize myself, right? But guess what? You don't have to suffer anymore. I have a breakthrough for you, and it's coming on May 16th. Holistic Breakthrough Live is back, and it's just for you, Mama. It's just for you so that you can start living your life in the way that you envision it, and you can create the health that you truly want and deserve. I want you to set yourself up for success with feasible lifestyle shifts, and it's all happening during this breakthrough week. From May 16th to May 20th, you can join me live in my private Facebook group for 5 days of inspiration, education, and quite frankly, an amazing community. What you're gonna learn are key components that are gonna help you create clarity toward your most holistic life. You're gonna learn how to define your story and why it impacts your daily health decisions. You're gonna learn how to implement a plant-based lifestyle, or at least start eating more plants. You're gonna learn how to reduce your toxic load and how to set yourself up for success in terms of your environment. And finally, you're gonna have a better vision for the steps that you need to take to become the most healthy and up-leveled you. I know that you're tired of feeling overwhelmed, and I know that you're tired of putting yourself last. This week is gonna help change all of that for you. So I'm asking for you to show up with the energy that you want and that you want to share with the world. Whether it's gaining more confidence, your long-term health, being more eco-friendly, or keeping your body and your family safe, this week will be game-changing. So if you're in, just click the link down in the show notes to join Holistic Breakthrough Live, and I will see you there. Are you coming? You decided with Food is Climate that you wanted to write this book because why?
Well,
what was the deciding factor?
As I began to understand that Al Gore and others have been misleading us, intentionally or not. Apparently Al Gore also has some cattle, so maybe he actually is conflicted and wants to believe that there's a future for raising animals for food. There isn't. And I think Al Gore is a vegan. He doesn't like to talk about it, but I believe he became a vegan in response to a lot of criticism. But we're in a situation where our climate is at stake, our atmosphere, our civilization, our future is at stake, and we're not being told the truth. So I wrote Food is Climate to try to help get the truth out, which is that if we first transform to a vegan universe, if we can transform as much of civilization as possible to being vegan, then we can probably continue to drive our cars and fly in airplanes and visit Paris and have cell phones and have the modern life we have. And the planet will start to cool.
Mm-hmm.
But if we do what Al Gore and the others want us to do, somehow get to zero burning of fossil fuels, and they never say exactly, I mean, of course, they encourage renewables, and so do I. But how exactly are we going to not use any fossil fuels to heat our homes anytime soon? Are we going to not use any fossil fuels for cooking anytime soon? Are we going to use no fossil fuels for manufacturing anytime soon? I mean, yes, let's transition as much as we can to solar and wind and renewable energy. I don't have any disagreement there. But realistically, we're not going to get to zero burning of fossil fuels anytime soon. We don't have solar airplanes. Even if we eliminate all burning of fossil fuels, it won't make a lick of difference. The only thing that will make the difference is stopping eating animals, transform to a vegan world, and then we can slowly transition off fossil fuels. But if we just transition off fossil fuels and we don't transition away from eating animals, we don't have a prayer.
Mm-hmm. It's scary. And it's something that keeps me up at night. And I just really hope that your message and your book can help people understand what's going on and, make the connection, because this is a super important topic. Obviously, this is our only home, and we all exist on it together. And we need to, I was just chatting with a friend today, Glen. Meatless Monday isn't going to do it. It's not going to cut it. What's going to make a difference is every other day meatless, every other meal meatless, right? And just taking it one day at a time. So do you have any tips before we wrap up about, for people, especially for people who don't want to go 100, 360 overnight, or just very, they want to save the planet, but they just don't know where to start. Do you have like some top tips for them?
Well, my strong advice is to go vegan as soon as you can. And you would be surprised, but for those of you who are skeptical, you could probably do it very easily tomorrow. It really isn't hard to go vegan. And so there's this argument between what I'll call the gradualists and the, full steam ahead vegans. And the gradualist argument is to say, well, for some people it's hard, so let's help them make the transition. Let's start with meatless Mondays and let's gradually move them towards veganism. And I don't want to discourage anybody. If somebody says, well, the best I can do is to cut down on meat by half, well, then what can I say? Do the best you think you can do. But I want to also plant the idea in your head that you could really do the whole thing. It isn't hard. It isn't hard to go vegan. And also, I will guarantee you health benefits. This is my book, Own Your Health, which is all about the health benefits of the whole food plant-based diet. And it's full of my anecdotes and a lot of comedic stories about nutrition. I tried to write the funniest book ever written on nutrition, which is a low bar. But as I say in Own Your Health, if you take your health into your own hands and recognize that diet is usually the most important thing that affects your health. If you smoke cigarettes, that's also going to affect your health. So it's diet and lifestyle. But if you take your health into your own hands and become a healthy vegan, which doesn't mean vegan donuts, it means whole food, plant-based eating, low fat, no oil, optimally try to avoid the oils. you can improve your health so much that it will shock you. And so much of what's involved is boiling water. You boil water and you put rice in it, you get rice. You boil water and you put millet in it, you get millet. You get buckwheat, you get oatmeal. And so if you can boil water, you can get the basic whole grains that you need. And then if you could steam or put a potato in the oven, then you get potatoes, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, purple potatoes, red potatoes. They're delicious. They fill you up. They help make a staple of the diet. They make it easy to create meals. Beans and lentils, legumes are another staple. So my wife and I will make meals just, without thinking. We'll put up some rice. We'll add some vegetables. We'll maybe throw in some tempeh or tofu or beans, and it's easy. And so you could whip up a great meal in a half hour, and they'll be the healthiest meals you could possibly have. And then you go to your doctor once a year, see how he or she is feeling, and you come home. And that's it. It's easy.
It is. I love your approach. And I think that, and I just want to send this message out to our listeners. When Glen says go vegan, he's saying go vegan for the planet, go plant-based for your health, right? Like whatever you want to call it, vegan, whole food, plant-based, we need to stop with the animal consumption in whatever fashion that you can. Okay. Every little bit counts. Every little meat swap helps. Every little non-dairy ice cream that you buy, optimally, you're just eating nice cream instead. But every step counts. And he says, try it overnight, just go vegan. It really is that easy. There's so many options to switch and to substitute now, even though some of the substitutions are not optimal for your health, they're still better than their animal counterparts for the planet and for your health, period. They are. There's even studies coming out about the Beyond Burger and the Impossible Burger, actually giving you better cardiovascular markers than the beef. So it's very interesting. But if we want to save our planet, we need to make sure that we're putting plants in our body, and that's it. And it's really that simple. So I like your approach, Glen. You're just go vegan. Just go vegan. Okay. So this is the last question I ask every single guest, Glen. Might come off a little bit out of left field, but I think this all goes together. What does holistic living mean to you? Because I teach people about that, and I want to know what your viewpoint is on that.
Well, I guess if I think of the term holistic living, I think of it to mean everything you do. So it encompasses eating, but also consuming. Are you buying too many things that are plastic? Are you wasting? Are you driving a vehicle that is polluting? So I guess that's my sense of the term holistic is, how do you live your whole life in a way that is healthiest for the planet and for yourself?
Yeah, I like it. It's true. Okay, my friend, do you have anything you want to add before we go?
I have a website, which is www.glenmerzer.com. And I'm starting a health newsletter called the Own Your Health newsletter. So people could, it's a free monthly newsletter. If people want to contact me through the website, they could join the newsletter there. And I hope people will want to check out the new book that AJ and I have, the 10th anniversary edition of Unprocessed. And I hope people will read Food is Climate and Own Your Health.
And Own Your Health. Yeah. I have all three now, so I feel good about it. So Glen, thank you for your time. We appreciate you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your message so passionately.
Thank you, Stacey. Good to be with you.
I'm over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of The Urban Pharmacy. For today's show notes, head on over to theurbanpharmacy.com and be sure to join us inside our private Facebook group called The Urban Pharmacy, where we share inspiration, live trainings, and holistic living tips to help you build community and the healthy lifestyle that you've always wanted. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and please consider leaving us a 5-star review. Before we connect again on the next show, follow me on Instagram at The Urban Pharmacy. That's urban with an H and pharmacy with an F. And I can't wait to hear your wellness journey as we get to know each other better. You know, there's truly no better time than now to level up your life, and I am so proud of you for showing up today. Until next time, be well, Health Crusader.